was far too large to be called a sword. Massive, thick, heavy, and far too rough. Indeed, it was more like a hulking mass of iron.
Berserk isn't your average story. It's a long-running dark fantasy manga that's been running since 1989 that's frequently regarded as one of the best pieces of fiction ever made. Created by Japanese mangaka Kentaro Miura, its narrative is so well written it's basically perfect. Each page has so much rich detail you could spend hours obsessing over every panel, and its influence on the dark fantasy genre is continuously stretching over our pop culture landscape even if we don't realize it. From video games like Dark Souls, Final Fantasy VII, and Devil May Cry, to other critically acclaimed manga and anime like Attack on Titan or Hellsing. Some of the most popular properties out there owe much of their inspiration to Berserk. But despite all that, Miura's work itself has had a scant amount of actually successful adaptations.
My name is Critical20.
Hello, my name is Matias Amunategui. I'm from Chile, South America.
People call me Floofs within the project.
My name is Alice.
My name is Carly.
I make all the small little art thingies for the motion comic.
I'm a project manager and an animator for Studio Taka.
This is Studio Taka, a group of fans from all around the world working on trying to create a truly faithful and quality adaptation of this story on their own. They all work in their free time without any pay and release their work for absolutely free. Berserk the motion comic is a project unlike any other. Why does something like this need to happen in the first place? Why does a story with so much impact, praise, and content that's been going on for over 30 years need these hard-working artists to go so out of their way to make this product? Why does Studio Taka need to exist? Most popular and beloved manga have had an anime adaptation of it at some point that most audiences regard as, at the very least, worthy of existing. Sometimes you'll see two different adaptations of the same story, such as Hunter x Hunter or Fullmetal Alchemist, with the goal of the second try being to make the story look and present closer to the original source material. But Berserk hasn't really had that. The 1997 anime is typically well regarded as the perfect introduction to the series.
I watched the first episode of the 1997 series with some friends back in about 2004, and I got hooked pretty much instantly.
It catches you. Yeah. Nothing else has caught me that much.
I gave the 97 anime a watch, then I decided to give it a read.
After that cliffhanger of an ending, I had no choice but to start reading the manga.
It covers the Golden Age arc, which spans from volumes 3 to 14 of the manga, roughly a third of the total story. It's still very faithful to the characters and general narrative, but ultimately restrictions on time, money, and parental guidelines resulted in an adaptation that doesn't really reflect its source material. It's still great, but it wasn't exactly Berserk. And to top that, it ended on what is arguably the most shocking and horrific moment in the entire manga, only to never receive a second season. For years, fans were left waiting to find out what happened next, but we're left with nothing on the anime front. From 2012 to 2013, Berserk was adapted again as a film trilogy. But it was still an adaptation of the Golden Age arc, which was confusing? Why remake that chunk of story again when people have had over a decade to either watch the 97 anime or reread the manga? It wasn't for accuracy, because these movies leave even more on the cutting room floor than the anime did, including some of the most important moments in the entire series. The animation looked great for the most part, but very often it would use experimental 3D animation to try and spread their budget as far as they could, which was met with criticism. So now we have two adaptations of the same chunk of story, each unfaithful to the source material in their own way. Several more years would go by until we got any more word on a Berserk adaptation. And Berserk 2016 is...
So the motion comic largely came to be because a collection of fans were really unhappy with the 2016 series.
Oh boy, weren't they?
I watched the animation movies which came after the anime, thinking that it was the 2016 one.
Yeah.
And I was like, why everyone is so pissed about it? That's okay. And then I watched the 2016 one, the actual ones, and I say, okay, no, okay, now I understand.
At some point, I decided to also watch 2016 anime for whatever reason.
The reception was incredibly bad, mostly because of the animation, but also because for the third time in a row, large chunks of the story were ripped out and restructured to something that poorly represented the manga. But so what? Lots of anime change things between the manga without getting backlash. Why is Berserk any different? Well, because it is different. Berserk isn't like other properties out there, and it's defined by its polish and storytelling. Miura is a masterful artist, and when you can't translate that kind of beauty to the screen, you really do lose something. Aside from the visuals, the story itself spans across decades of chapters, each adding to, recontextualizing, or redefining the content that came before it to continuously add complexity and depth. Every piece of the puzzle that builds Berserk's narrative serves an explicit purpose, no matter how small. So, to go back to the question, why does Studio Taka need to exist? When you've been given several attempts to try and bring something you love to life that all fail in some way, what do? After the disappointment of the 2016 anime, a group of fans decided they would just make it themselves. One of the founders, Captain Floofy, got countless talented artists together to create a motion comic adaptation.
And one day, just some other user by the name of Puck, he was saying like, oh, like it'd be, kind of neat if we made like a motion comic or like a fan of the manga, right?
One of my pet peeves with adaptations of any kind, like movies or anime or whatever, a lot of times they'll make a lot of changes that are either unnecessary or just make things worse. And
Whenever you see an anime or a Netflix adaptation or whatever, they're usually they're condensing as much as they can to be able to produce this and sell it out.
the motion comic is like as pure as it's going to get when it comes to an adaptation. We're animating the manga itself.
The actual panels, his art, and animating it as loyally as possible. And we're not going to be skipping a beat. We're not going to skip a panel, skip a chapter.
Now fans don't have to have problems with janky animation or differences between the source material, because the material is literally ripped from the source. All they're doing is taking what's already there and giving the panels a bit of movement, preserving everything about the manga that made people fall in love with it in the first place. Now, that process might sound simple at first, but I promise you it isn't. It's not something as simple as clicking and dragging chunks of the manga. There are a lot of steps that go into making these animations happen.
You see this panel, we need to analyze the panel and see what kind of motion Miura, the artist, was trying to achieve with this panel.
So we split the panel and the drawings like puppets with all the different limbs and all the different items which would be animated.
We need to recreate the background. So we cut out the main character and then we draw in the background. After that, we need to see what parts of the character that we just cut out of we need to animate.
Then I need to complete this part. Because, for example, if I remove my head here, you see the background behind?
Yeah.
But in the panel, there is a blank. But maybe the character wants to leave. So I need to fill in all the parts.
To be honest, the motion comic format is kind of deceptive at first glance. You see that it's just an animated version of a 2D image, and you just kind of assume that the bulk of the work must come from making that movement itself. In reality, some of these shots have more handmade artwork and assets than they do pieces of the original source material. Someone that I heard about a ton in all these interviews was Alexander, the animation director for the comic. He's actually living in Ukraine at the moment. He's safe, I swear, I'll get to him later. Working full-time as an animator while still contributing an insane amount to the motion comic.
There were 297 total panels for episode 2. Do you want to take a guess at how many of those Alexander animated by himself?
Oh my god, we're 210?
240.
God damn. And that's just one guy. Everyone working on this project is incredibly talented, but it can't be stressed enough how much of themselves they're giving here. These artists are all based in different countries and backgrounds, some having enough free time to pursue this project as much as they like, and some still in school or working full-time. Berserk is special. These passionate people are willing to put in the work they do because they're honored to make something that pays so much respect to it. especially when the person who inspired them is no longer here to create with them. In early May of 2021, Kitara Miura passed away due to long persisting health problems at the age of 54. A true genius through and through, who is still working on Berserk a whole 41 volumes in. Miura was a really reclusive type of person, with very little being known about him, and only about 4 or 5 pictures of him even existing online. People knew he had some health problems, sure, but nobody could have ever known the world was going to take this man away from us as soon as it did.
Honestly, his death hit me pretty hard. I cried about it for a couple of days, and it really like made me pretty depressed.
And he had just so much done and all this beautiful stuff. What's going to happen now? I have no idea.
With him gone, right? It's like, are we really doing some things justice? Like, what happens if people get upset about this or that, right?
So now there's this pressure on Taka. It's not just about adapting the manga, but now also creating something that needs to serve Miura's legacy. Berserk the motion comic isn't just a fun little experiment anymore, and it's something the community needs to help heal the wounds left behind by his passing. Nothing before has ever paid as much respect to the source material as this project has. Now that we know that that material likely isn't ever going to be finished, there's a lot riding on Studio Taka. Studio Taka has provided an opportunity for some of the most talented and hard-working artists I've ever met to grow and flourish both professionally and personally. Alexander, the previously mentioned animation director, is currently living in West Ukraine, just a few miles from war at any given moment. One time, I heard an explosion myself. A missile hit by our air defense over the town. The alarm siren rang several times a day, every day. It's hard to describe the horror of when I first ran out of my apartment in the middle of the night, heading to the bomb shelter. And in the pitch black darkness, I heard the siren like some supernatural howling in the sky. For a while, it was impossible for me to work on the project. It was impossible to work at all because I couldn't think about anything but war. I was just sitting and scrolling through the news in a trance. But people on the project sent me a lot of comforting words and support. That meant so much to me. In situations like this, I truly feel that we are more than just a bunch of random guys from around the internet. We are really close friends, even if we are located all over the world. This is just another example of what makes Studio Taka special. This group of unique individuals have found each other because of their love for Berserk, and have built a spectacular bond from that. And through their artistic endeavors, the Berserk community has been able to grow closer as well. Through the motion comic, fans have something to look forward to again, just like they used to do when waiting for Miura to publish another chapter. I didn't get to interview everyone in Studio Taka, even though I really wish I could have. This team is filled to the brim with talented artists helping with animation, voice acting, sound design, music, direction, everything that makes this project come to life. And that's not even touching the lore department, who specialize in producing videos to the Studio Taka channel besides the comic, like video essays and my personal favorite, Guts loses Griffith in the supermarket. And I can't stress this enough. They're doing all of this for free. Studio Taka deserves all the support in the world because they're a team of artists who are just as special as Berserk is. Please, if I haven't convinced you already, go watch the motion comic. I am not kidding when I say that it is probably one of the best ways to experience the Black Swordsman arc out there, especially with how much each episode is skyrocketing in quality. You can also support Studio Taka directly on Patreon, which I encourage as many of you to do as you can. Thank you, Taka, both for letting me get to know you, for making something to help heal the wounds of one of the most passionate communities in the world. Thank you for showing that it's more than possible to adapt the unadaptable.
It's up to you. The fast was you'll be finding.